say, dirtbag. This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow.
This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
You are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 389 of the DCAU Review. I'm Liam. With me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we are still vacationing in the sunny skies of Metropolis, but with so few original reviews left with Superman the Animated Series, in fact, I believe our count is down to 1. We are looking for ways to extend our stay here, so to speak. And one of the ways we like to do that is, of course, to pick an individual character and look at their entire DCAU storyline, their DCAU career, as it were. And we're doing that this week with one of Superman's maybe most recognizable foes.
Yeah, that's right. And may I just say, before we get started here, it is an honor to be here with the person who earned the moniker of the Batman of Rage Bait this week. It's truly an honor to share the podcast airwaves with you. And if you don't know what we're talking about, please, cheap plug for our Twitter X, head over to twitter.com/DCAU review. I'm sure it'll redirect you. But it's truly an honor to be here with you on such a momentous occasion after gaining this moniker. It's I just gotta ask you, how does it feel to be known as the Batman of Rage Bait?
Well, as I said in response, I would like that etched onto my tombstone. So, to anyone, my friends, my family, my girlfriend, anyone who's listening, if I happen to die before you, you know what my last will and testament is, and that's to have that etched on my tombstone. So, yes, that's one of the only times I would encourage anyone to spend any more time on social media than they already do. But we did have a lot of fun with our Valentine's Day posting over the last weekend, as we did, at least at the time of original airing. So yeah, that was a hoot. And
Yes,
and from there, as mentioned, we are moving on to this week's character spotlight, as mentioned, for one of the biggest Superman foes of them all.
Yes. We'll take the spot off of Liam, aka the Batman of Rage Bait, now, and focus the big old DCAU spotlight, as you mentioned, on one of Superman's more notable foes. Although I don't know that he is one of the big bads here in the DCAU, but as you mentioned last week when we were previewing this episode, culturally, he might be the most well-known Superman villain, but people might even not realize that they're name-checking him when they talk about it, and of course, that is Bizarro. And from everything from way back in, if you're a fan of Seinfeld, I can remember there's a Seinfeld episode where Superman and Bizarro are discussed. There's a whole storyline where there's like a Bizarro Jerry Seinfeld that shows up, and a Bizarro George and a Bizarro Kramer. It's so ingrained, like this character is so ingrained in our culture that it's just more or less something we portray as like out of the ordinary or like the opposite of. But of course, he did play a role in some memorable episodes here in the DCAU, specifically, obviously, kicking off in Superman the Animated Series. But then later on, of course, he did show back up in several episodes of Justice League Unlimited. So we do have a lot to talk about today. We'll talk about his appearances in the shows. We'll talk about some tie-in comics, as we always do here. We'll also talk about the voice actors that brought this character to life. We say actors because there were multiple, since we had multiple Supermen. And then, some musical notes also, pun intended, from the late great Shirley Walker, the Bizarro theme. And then we'll wrap things up with a little discussion on collectibles. And if you're a Bizarro fan, some of the things that you can kind of go out there and look for to create a complete Bizarro DCAU collection.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. And before we get into recapping Bizarro's entire DCAU timeline in this character spotlight, we will, of course, remind the folks at home listening about the best way to support us on the podcast. And that is, of course, at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review.
That's right, Liam. And if you would like to support the podcast, you can head over there today, buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, and become either a monthly supporter of the podcast or a one-time supporter of the podcast. If you want to become a monthly supporter of the podcast, you get some really great perks at any of the three levels that we offer. You can join at any level and get some great, awesome perks just for joining and supporting the podcast. Or if you join that top tier, which is known as our super friend tier, that gets you all of the perks plus the bonus perk exclusive to that level, which is being able to ask a question and hear your answer right here on the air about whatever topic as we discuss this week, or whatever episode that we're discussing on typical weeks. So, or maybe you just want to feel generous one day and keep the creative juices flowing here with Liam and I, and maybe you want to just absolutely compliment the Batman of Rage Bait on his masterful job at baiting the masses into complete and total rage, just utter and total disillusionment with who they are on Twitter X. That would be a fine way to use the buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review support option. So either way, if you want to join us at a monthly support level or a one-time support level, we ask you please consider heading over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and support the podcast today.
Absolutely. So from then we will get into Bizarro's first DCAU appearance, which of course took place in Superman, but we will also mention, as we always do whenever we do a character spotlight, we'll look at the initial comic book origins of the character. And this here Bizarro character originally debuted back in Superboy number 68, created by Otto Binder and George Papp. So yeah, back in the days where that's the Clark Kent version, where he was basically in the costume as a teenager in Smallville. There was a whole comic series, which I think is that version of Superboy has made a comeback in the modern DC comics recently. But this is of course the Smallville Clark Kent adventures, but with plenty of tights and flights, unlike the 2001 show. And yes, the clone of Superman first appeared there and spun out into this crazy. Sometimes he's a clone, sometimes he's like from another Bizarro world dimension. It's like a cube. The Earth is shaped like a cube on Bizarro world, and there's Bizarro Batman and Bizarro Wonder Woman and Bizarro everybody. So there's been quite a few different versions over the years. A lot of great artists and writers have sort of added to that over the years. And as you mentioned, Cal, just kind of a staple of pop culture. The word Bizarro, everyone uses that, even if they don't realize they're referencing a Superman character. That is kind of where it comes from. So a very funny little bit of pop culture that comic books have added to without maybe getting the proper credit for. But yes, we will get to his first DCAU appearance here, and that is in the episode Identity Crisis. We see Superman just sort of floating around, seemingly doing normal Superman things, including saving a falling journalist who's just been knocked off of the side of a cliff. But that journalist happens to be Clark Kent, which is a little bit odd. If longtime viewers of the show may have noticed that there's kind of a strange, it's kind of strange that Superman would be saving Clark Kent. And as we see, there are actually two Supermen afoot, and one of those Supermen begins to sort of slowly have his skin begin to sort of wilt and turn white. He gets into quite a pitched battle with the other Man of Steel and knocks him around. We see him go running off towards a lab somewhere out in the famous Metropolis desert. And we find out the truth of this version of Bizarro, and that is, who else would be behind this but Lex Luthor, looking to create a army of Superman clones. And Bizarro was his first test subject. And it's clear there are some kinks to work out, even as Bizarro insists that he is still the true Superman, and goes out to prove it by doing things like repairing bridges. And by repairing bridges, he means forcing a bridge that was opening for a ship to pass back together, smashing through walls, a lot of property damage as he then decides he's going to take Lois back to the lab to show him where he was born. And as she begins to uncover the conspiracy, Superman and Bizarro come to blows once more, as Bizarro is sort of faced with the fact that Lex doesn't really have his best interests at heart, and in fact plans on replacing him with another one of these clones after more experimentation. There's a big fight. The lab explodes, although as Superman and Lois are sort of caught in the debris, who else but Bizarro does make the save as he finally acknowledges when he sees that Superman saves Lois Lane, that Superman must be the true hero. He must be the real Superman. And Bizarro is going to save the day. He's going to hold up part of the ceiling so that they can get to safety. And as he's about to be engulfed in flames and crushed under debris, Lois does remark that he is truly a hero in his own right as well, which seems to give him some peace as as the building collapses on him, seemingly ending things once and for all with Bizarro. But come on, we've been watching superhero cartoons and reading comic books to know that nobody means there's a good chance this guy's going to pop up again. But certainly an exciting first appearance for Bizarro bursting onto the scene, intermingling the idea of like, which I feel like is a lot of the villains are introduced, or at least a few of the more prominent ones, like Metallo, which is just Lex is just finding ways to get at this guy without without actually putting on a big green power suit and fighting him himself, not yet anyway. So Lex being the puppet master, and he doesn't really care who he hurts to get at Superman, even as we see that this version of Bizarro, he means well, even though he can't really seem to tell right from wrong most of the time.
Yeah, I remember this episode being an interesting one because I believe we even put it in the show notes, but we dubbed this one being chock full of Lex position, where we have Lex doing a lot of the heavy lifting with explaining what is going on story wise here, why he's interested in Superman's DNA and all that. So, yeah, it does in some ways I feel like set up some of the things later on that we see with the general distrust that we come to see that a portion of the public has for Superman and the Justice League. So, creating their own race of superheroes would be important to battle those metahumans, if need be, if the time would come and the government would call upon them. So, kind of laying a little bit of groundwork here. But yeah, obviously the main thing here being the introduction of this character, an explanation of who this character is. It's interesting. I think when this episode came out in 1997, so we're just a few years post the death of Superman's storyline, where there was a pretty famous Superboy clone used in that that storyline. That was, correct me if I'm wrong, they may have changed it 2 or 3 times since then, but was either cloned by Lex or a clone of Lex and Superman's
Yes.
DNA combined. So cloning and Superman has been around in the pretty recent future, or past rather, of this episode's debut. So mixing all of that with giving it a DCAU flavor is kind of fun. It's obviously this one's a little bit more serious than we would see the following episodes of Bizarro. But yeah, the tragedy obviously at the end, him believing that he truly was Superman, and then obviously Lex doing that thing that he does later on with Amazo, where he's taking advantage of somebody who is a little bit naive or doesn't quite realize what's going on, all for the sake of Lex's own good, is part of the story here. It's a good one. I think it's fun from what I remember. We didn't necessarily love it as far as the scores are concerned. I gave it a 24 out of 40. You gave it a 27 out of 40. So yours is a little higher than mine. That was episode 56, if you want to hear our thoughts on that one. I also remember this being the episode where we were confused because The whole thing is that Bizarro starts out as a perfect copy of Superman, and then his body DNA starts to break down.
Hmm.
But his suit also changes mid-episode, and we couldn't quite figure out if his suit was part of his DNA. Like he doesn't actually
Right.
have clothes; it's his skin that's also a suit, and that it was breaking down, or if there was some storyline explanation off screen for why his suit changed color and the S got all wonky in mid episode. But yeah, it's a fun introduction to the character. I think it obviously with the open ending there, you kind of knew that things were certainly not over for our character here, with the door being left over for him to return.
Absolutely. And return he would soon after in the episode Bizarro's World, aptly titled. We see that Bizarro has been off sort of wandering, a little bit lost, not sure who he is or what his place is in this world, though he happens to be meandering past like a ski lodge or something, and overhear a news report where that son of a bee, Professor Hamilton, who can't keep his mouth shut, is just on TV telling everyone where the Fortress of Solitude is. What, like, the idea that it was a shock that this guy betrayed Superman and Justice League is like, I don't think Superman was paying attention. I think he was, I think Clark was asleep at the wheel here. This guy is just out there telling all your dirty laundry long before the events of Legacy or the later seasons of Justice League. So bad friend, Professor Hamilton. But yes, due to that bit of knowledge dropped on Bizarro, he decides to head to the Fortress of Solitude. And this is kind of a fun gag because he goes there. And of course, the fortress and the fortress computer, the Brainiac orb, is key to Superman's DNA. But because Bizarro is a clone, it does in fact work. And so when he asks the orb to tell him who he is, the orb shows him images of Krypton and tells him that he is Kal-El and that he had a mother and father, and that he lived on this beautiful planet of Krypton before it exploded, and he even had a dog named Crypto, and that of course that warms Bizarro's heart. And he even meets one of the crazy alien lizard animals from Superman's intergalactic zoo and promptly names it Crypto, despite the fact that it's not a dog and all it tries to do is just constantly eat him. Um, not a well trained animal to say the least, but Bizarro loves him anyway. Adopt, don't shop. Bizarro's a big believer in that, so he takes Crypto and heads back to Metropolis. He takes hold of Lois and decides that what else would one do after being given the knowledge from that Brainiac orb? He's going to recreate Krypton right there on Earth. He tries to sort of hastily manufacture a building that kind of looks like a building from Krypton by smashing holes. He sees a doorman that kind of looks like Jor-El, so he takes him and declares him his father. And he decides that this is where he and Lois and his dad, the doorman, are going to live, along with Crypto, who of course is trying to bite everyone. Suffice to say, things are not looking good, and it wouldn't just be enough for Superman and Bizarro then to have fisticuffs over this. That's not a big enough stake. So Bizarro decides that, well, since this is Krypton, well, he's got another idea, to say the least, of how he's going to continue acting out Krypton's story.
Yeah, that's right. Well, much like Krypton was destroyed, he decides that Earth must suffer the same fate, and in order for him to truly fulfill his destiny as Superman, so he launches a gigantic missile into or from a missile base headed towards Metropolis. So, despite his attempts to stop it, Superman is intercepted by Bizarro. So a battle ensues between the two of them. Noting that Krypton Krypton needs the missile is what ultimately Bizarro insists. Superman does his best to stop it, but ultimately has to plead with Bizarro for the sake of Lois and Crypto. So Bizarro ultimately decides, instead of rushing to stop the missile, he decides to go save Lois. This gives Superman enough time to prevent the missile from exploding the entire city of Metropolis. And then, of course, this ends up with a kind of a Superman's left with a little bit of a dilemma because he realizes that deep down, Bizarro just doesn't quite understand enough. He's not evil. Like this isn't the typical incarnation of Bizarro, like we saw in the Super Friends, where he was just anti-Superman essentially. He's or the anti-Superman. He's just kind of a bit naive and is kind of easily confused and kind of has the mind of like I don't know a 3-year-old or something like that. So
Mhm.
he decides in the true Superman way, he's going to show mercy to this poor sap and decides that he's going to allow him to continue to live. No lobotomies here for this Kryptonian type alien. He instead decides he's going to ship him off to his own planet to rule, and he allows him to take Crypto with him. So that's what we see at the end. Bizarro is given his own planet to rule and be there on his own, and that's where we leave things. As Superman is happy, and Bizarro is happy with Crypto to keep him company and have a planet of his own to protect and serve, but out of obviously Superman's hair, not causing or posing any threats to Earth anymore. Well, we say that, but at least until the next episode. But if you want to hear our thoughts on this one was episode 234 of the podcast. Again, we didn't super love this one. We ended up with a 25 out of 40, and you ended up with a 24 out of 40. So a little bit on the lower end again for our scores there. It doesn't it in discussing though the humor that takes place here and the idea of Bizarro putting this Earth together that he thinks is his Earth is pretty entertaining. I think that being said, it's it kind of wears a little thin here, and I think we talked about that when we were listening or when we reviewed the episode, and it's a little bit this story meanders a little bit between comedy, tragedy, happenstance. It kind of doesn't know where to settle, and all of that gives you this kind of weird up and down feeling, inconsistent feeling. If it was straight comedy the entire episode, I think this probably would be a memorable one for that reason. But there are points of it that try to get a little too serious, and with this character, especially the naive way that this character exists, Bizarro, it's hard to take it too seriously at times. So I think that's probably why our scores were down there. But that's not to say it's not at least entertaining to watch these characters interact, which is why it was even more fun to see this character return yet again in Superman the Animated Series.
Absolutely, and this time Bizarro would not be alone in his antics, as while he seems to happily be patrolling his vacant home world, his Bizarro world, even with makeshift mannequins of several members, including a very round, bald, like giant pearl that he's named Luthor, which is a great gag. It's very smooth, and his Lois doll and all of this
They're
stuff, and
rock
of course
people made of rocks. Like
that's
that's
right.
they're like rocks and sticks and leaves. Lois has got lipstick painted on her. Superman's got like the red S on his
Mhm.
chest. He's got these, they're representative of how he feels about them, I'm sure.
And he's having a good time. He creates a disaster and then saves the rock villagers from it each day. Seems to be having a good time, and of course, he still has Crypto there with him. But all of a sudden, we hear a disembodied voice that can only be coming from Gilbert Gottfried, and that is, of course, the appearance of another recurring Superman foe, that being that pesky dimensional imp, Mr. Mixius Spitlick, who has of course been banished from ever directly messing with Superman again. So he's found another way, which is to manipulate Bizarro into hating Superman and pitting them against each other for the third time. And so Mixie conjures up an image of a like a fake cartoon show of with the idea of Superman and the rest and Lois all laughing at him and talking about how stupid he is, and that of course incenses Bizarro, who goes flying off into space, forgetting that he can't breathe in space. But thankfully, he's got a interdimensional imp, as mentioned, with him, who teleports them both to Earth. And some battling ensues as Bizarro is very upset with Superman and with Lois over the idea that they would be laughing at him. You even see Bizarro shed tears in this scene as he's clearly very upset by all of this, as Mixie is sort of in the background. Really becomes more of a Mixie episode, this one, as we get into like the logistics of the fifth dimension magical powers, and there's like a council who like puts Mixie on trial for going back on his word that he wouldn't mess with Superman anymore, as Mixie and his girlfriend Gisby try to argue that there's like a loophole in the contract. It's pretty funny, but it's also not very Bizarro focused. So we'll come back to that part probably another day if we do a Mixie character spotlight or something. But yeah, suffice to say, while all of that is going on, the SCU is hard at work with all of these fancy weapons, and they're taking quite a toll on Bizarro, who looks like he may be down for the count. However, Superman jumps in front of the last blast, saving Bizarro, which kind of wakes up Bizarro to the idea that he's not really he's not really been told the full truth by the aptly titled, as the episode is called, the Little Big Head Man, as he's known.
Yeah, so this gives Superman enough time to calm down and continue speaking with Bizarro as he slowly realizes that he's been tricked. Superman then grabs one of the smoke bombs that apparently features some sort of anesthesia in it, and gives that to Bizarro, who succumbs to the anesthesia, gets knocked out. So this allows Superman to teleport or take Bizarro back to his own planet at that point, to bring their protector back to their planet. Bizarro then reveals that not only is he there to protect the rock people and crypto on his own planet, he also now has someone else to help him with the disasters and planning the disasters, as Mixia Spitlick has been sentenced there by the tribunal to continue to serve at Bizarro's pleasure at that point. So we see Mixie being tortured by Crypto, who chases him up a tree at the end of the episode for some comedy bits, right after being chased down a hill by a falling rock that Bizarro pushes after him. So all is well. Superman watches on from afar from the Fortress of Solitude from a television, noting that life am good. And that's the last that we see of Bizarro in Superman the Animated Series, at least on the big screen. That episode, by the way, if you want to hear our review of Little Big Head Man, that was a little over 100 episodes ago, as we reviewed it on episode 265 of the podcast. Liam, our scores for this one only slightly better than our previous two episodes. I gave a 28 out of 40 and you gave a 29 out of 40. So doing some little head math there, our average here in the mid to high 20s for our Bizarro trio of Bizarro episodes here. So not our best scores by any means. I don't know if that has anything to do with the plots for the episodes kind of being a little all over the place when you look at it. Like I said with the last episode, I think this episode obviously leaned a little bit more into the comedy of Mixia Spitlick, combining with Bizarro.
Mm-hmm.
And this one also was written by Paul Dini as well. So wondering whether or not this episode, which we loved the first Mixie episode, and it's one of our highest rated Superman the Animated Series episodes ever. But this episode famously called by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm as, quote, annoying, unquote. So we talked a little bit about that, I remember. So you know, that that I think may have had some direct influence on maybe how we felt about this episode. And I do remember also the animation for the episode is a little inconsistent because there's two different animation studios that ended up working on this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do remember having some us talking about the stiffness of a lot of the animation in Little Big Head Man, especially. So not all, not all related to poor Bizarro's fault, but yeah, suffice to say it was a little, maybe a little average or a little below, unfortunately, in the Superman outings for old Bizarro. And those were his last major appearances in the DCAU in those three Superman episodes. However, as we alluded to earlier, he did have several minor appearances in the last couple of seasons of Justice League Unlimited. Actually, he appears in the first season briefly in the episode Ultimatum, where we see, of course, that's the one with the sort of Super Friend homage characters. And we see that Long Shadow and Wonder Woman have teamed up to stop Giganta, who is attempting to break Grodd out of prison, her then boyfriend, gorilla friend. I don't know. Anyway, and she brought along some help as who else but Bizarro comes in to save the day. And he notes that he would do anything for Giganta because he loves her, even break her boyfriend out of trouble, out of prison. And really, if that's just not modern romance summed up, I mean, very forward thinking. What a thruple! What a thruple! Grodd, Giganta, and Bizarro make, huh?
Our first polycule in the DCAU history. We can't judge. It's the year 2026. Good for them. But yeah, this episode very much not Bizarro's story, as we will kind of come to talk about here. He does get some memorable lines throughout here, but yeah, it's nice. Of course, it doesn't seem like you're gonna have much of a. It would be difficult to have a Super Friends esque or inspired storyline or storylines without Bizarro, because he was such a big part of that Super
Mm-hmm.
Friends show. And so for him to be brought in, we don't get an explanation for why all of a sudden he left his happy home world where he was, saving rocks and torturing Mix's Spitlick. But that's fine. We don't need an explanation. He just somehow, maybe Grodd brought him there, or Giganta, through the power of whatever her looks, brought him all the way from this planet on the other side of the galaxy to come help out. So yeah, it's nice to see him show up here, and wouldn't be his last appearance either.
That's right. After a couple of cameos in the final season, in the beginning of the season in I Am Legion, and then again in To Another Shore as part of Grodd's new secret society slash Legion of Doom. Speaking of super friends, like you said, couldn't have a Legion of Doom homage without Bizarro in tow. And we even get to hear him speak a couple of times in the episodes later, including Dead Reckoning, which I believe we just covered last year. Of course, the Dead Man episode, he's one of Lex and Grodd's henchmen that gets sent to Nanda Parbat and then to Gorilla City. My feeling of that episode is just that there's a part where he's like, a bunch of monks pile on him, and then we see his eyes glow, and then we just hear like horrified yells. And I'm like, at the end, when all those guys come back to life, when their souls come back, do those guys get reconstituted as well, or are they just still like is there still just like a giant pile of ash from where Bizarro just absolutely murked those fools?
I think that's up to your own headcanon. I would tend to say that the other guys had bodies to come back to, whereas
Uh-huh.
it would take a reverse like Thanos situation here, where people would be snapped back from piles of dust into actual human existence. So I'm sure the argument could be made that they were reconstituted, but I would dare say that there was nothing to be reconstituted.
Yeah, so that might be his most memorable moment, although at least as form in a physical battle, his last and maybe only truly great moment in JLU, however, comes in an episode we did cover last year for sure, that being the Great Brain Robbery, when in the process of Lex and Flash having switched minds, as Flash is desperately trying to keep up the charade that he is in fact the real Lex Luthor, while he tries to figure out how to get back to his own body. Bizarro perks up and asks a simple question. As he points out that ever since the incident with Grodd and Lex, Lex has been acting, as he says, completely sane and rational, which of course in Bizarro speak is the opposite. And then he asks a very simple question, the iconic "Am you Bizarro's mommy?" which is just insane, and but it is incredibly memorable. So I do kind of like that his last big moment in the show is saying "Am you Bizarro's mommy?" That's
Yeah,
not
I
some
think
big last knockdown drag out fight with Superman or any of the other Justice Leaguers. It's just this funny little comedy bit that's thrown in.
Yeah, I honestly though as we talked about for how he was portrayed in Superman the animated series, it does fit this version of this character to just kind of be comedic relief. It's a little bit unnerving and feels a little bit out of place to have him taken seriously as like a
Mm-hmm.
serious threat. Obviously he is, but I think as we talked about in Superman the animated series, he's just a naive character that sort of gets taken advantage of or that doesn't doesn't understand who he is or what he is or doesn't know how to process what he is or who he is. Whereas here it's just like, all right, he's evil now and he's like doing evil things and eviscerating entire groups of Tibetan monks and also yeah. So him getting to get this one little last zing on Luthor, who's responsible essentially for a lot of his own personal pain and manipulation, for him to flip the tables there and get that little zinger on him, albeit again, not in a naive way, is really fun.
Yeah, and it should be noted that there's a little bit of a design a tweak to Bizarro. He has a scar on his forehead in that final season, as they mentioned that Grodd performed. There's moments during the season where various characters' brains basically melt down as they're about to let the heroes in on a little secret about what's going on with Grodd, and so it appears that that is why if you were looking for like a gotcha continuity thing, like why would Bizarro work for Lex after hating him back from Superman? There's your answer. They put a little scar on his forehead. I don't think it's visible in every shot he's in, but that is your nerdy answer for why Bizarro is okay with teaming up with Lex. And they also, I think, use that as an excuse to do a little bit more of like the backwards talk thing that he's so famous for in the comics, which they had never really done in Superman. So there's your in canon answer for why Bizarro talks backwards and works with Luthor.
There you go. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. That's some good character explanation there. I like it.
Agreed. And then yeah, a couple more minor appearances. He appears in the background of Grudge Match, which we just recently covered at the beginning of this year, actually. And then a couple episodes we have yet to cover, though they are not major appearances for him. You do see him in Alive and in Destroyer, the series finale of Justice League Unlimited. So that wraps up his on-screen appearances, Cal. But of course, before we get to all of the extracurriculars, the tie-in comics, the merchandise and all of that, we want to look at our, just like we do on a regular episode, we want to look at some of the other categories that we talk about. The first one being music. Now, of course, Bizarro does have a theme song, although it's interesting because technically we the episode where it first appears is credited to Christopher Carter. But of course, that theme, if you listen to it closely, is actually sounds pretty familiar and pretty similar to an existing character theme.
Yeah, I think in subsequent releases of as we'll talk about later in our collectibles, it's actually credited to a Shirley Walker composition. So it's because it sort of sounds like the Superman theme, believe it or not, just played in a couple of different keys. Some notes changed, some things that were done differently. I remember that specifically, obviously showing up in Identity Crisis. Not sure if it shows up. I know Lolita Retmanis does the music in, I want to say she does that in Bizarro's World. And then I know that Christopher Carter is back, I believe, for Little Big Head Man. But and the music for Little Big Head Man we actually loved because there's a varying different styles and stuff like that. But as far as the Bizarro theme itself, yeah, what else would you expect? It has to be like a inverted or backwards or off-key version of the Superman theme because he's Superman, just not quite Superman. It's his whole deal. So it would make sense for that character's theme song to be a version of that that just doesn't quite sound right, which is ultimately what we get for that theme song.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great piece of music. Like you said, it's essentially follows the notes of the Superman theme, but played in this really off kilter minor key. It's really uh quite eerie when you first hear it. And like with the Superman theme, it kind of reflects whatever's going on. There's moments where it's played almost more dramatically when the transformation is first happening, and then maybe a bit for levity as he and in his subsequent appearances. So great work from all of our composers, including Miss Walker, credited with the original composition. And then we could talk about who voiced Bizarro, and maybe that I feel like this is ultimately the most fun part of using a character like Bizarro in this show, because thanks to this in Superman the animated series and then subsequently in Justice League, when we talk about our Bizarro voice actor, of course he's a clone of Superman. So who better than the voice of Superman to voice him? And in this case, we have two, that being, of course, the great Tim Daly and the equally great George Newbern. Though certainly Mr. Daly's performances, just because he had so much more to do, are certainly the more memorable of the two actors, I'd say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember us talking about specifically an identity crisis. That was one of the first episodes I feel like where it really stood out to me that when you have a voice actor, any voice actor doing multiple roles in the same episode, sometimes the same character, essentially doing multiple versions of the same character, that that must come with a certain level of difficulty and you have to have a certain level of skill, I feel like, to be able to pull that off, to differentiate, especially when it's a medium in which you yourself cannot emote facial expressions or gestures or posture or anything like that. You're solely relying on the artists that are drawing the character to kind of differentiate partially visually, but you also have a responsibility to sort of differentiate who they are. And obviously, as you mentioned, Tim Daly gets a much more of a lion's share of the duties as far as the amount of time, screen time that Bizarro gets in Superman the Animated Series. So, yeah, his performance, I remember us being very, very complimentary of his performance, especially in Identity Crisis, because there is this portion where he sounds like Superman, but then his voice, just like his DNA, starts to break down, and there is this sort of dumbing down of maybe his dialogue a little bit, but his voice gets more character to it. There's more of a struggle to it. There's more of a break in his dialogue, the way his sentences form, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So that coupled with some of the way that he chooses to enunciate words or pronounce words is really, really, really fantastic. It's really a pleasure to listen to and hear how he was able to kind of make this character stand out, still sound like he was a DNA branch from the original. You know, you can obviously tell that it's Tim
Mm-hmm.
Daly doing the voice, but obviously it's this completely it evolves into this completely separate character that just happens to be based on that character essentially. So yeah, it obviously, as we said, Tim Daly sort of has a little bit of an unfair advantage just because of the screen time that he ends up getting, three
Yeah.
starring episodes essentially for Bizarro. But you know, that's not to say that George Newbern's turn as Bizarro is anything to scoff at. We just talked about his his line about MU Bizarro's mommy is absolutely memorable, and it's you know it's not one to one obviously because it's not as much dialogue that that Tim Daly had, but it's the same in the spirit of the same thing. He was coached the same way. I think it helps that Andrea Romano was the the voice director for both of these, was probably able to offer those great pieces of advice on what they were looking for that character to sound like, and how to bring out that version of the character from somebody who's kind of used to doing one kind of straight-laced, almost a borderline emotionless at times character, to this more goofy, maybe dumbed down version of that character. So yeah, great things from both of our Supermen doing their Bizarros there, but I'd have to give the advantage to Tim Daly just because the amount of dialogue he ended up having to do, and being able to help create that character in a way that made it memorable.
Absolutely. Yeah, can't add too much to that. I will just say this is kind of an Easter egg, but Tim and his son Sam, who also I think voiced Superman in a couple of projects later on, had like a web series that they did together, like sort of a Curb Your Enthusiasm, like comedic take on their own lives as actor, father, and son. And there's an episode that also happens to feature Susan Eisenberg, funny enough, where he like in the middle of it just starts to do he blames like a problem that he has on Bizarro Tim, and he starts doing the Bizarro voice, and watching the way like his face transforms as he does it, like his like he almost comes like hunches over and like his lip kind of juts out like he's an ape or something. Like it's fascinating to watch. As you know, there's so much footage over the years that we've seen of like Mark Hamill doing the Joker voice and how he sort of physically transforms his body, even though it's an audio, an audio medium. And that's a fun way you can look up. I think it's the Daily Show. It's the name of the show, but of course Daily spelled like his last name Daly. I think you can still find that on YouTube if you ever are curious about what it looked like to see Tim doing the Bizarro voice in studio. That's probably our best chance to see that. So a special shout out to him, and of course Mr. Newburn does an admirable job, but just not much to sink his teeth into as an actor, unfortunately. But from there, Cal, we should also mention, because it's on the DCAU wiki, and that's our Bible here, quite frankly. Apparently Bizarro is mentioned in the episode Rose Gift of the Zeta Project, so which I think we watched. That's the one with the brain trust on it, I think. So I don't remember that, but as usual, I have tried to purge everything from the Zeta Project that I've already had to review out of my brain. So apparently Bizarro gets a name check in that episode. So there you go. We mentioned it. Nobody can yell at us now.
There we go. Thank you. Those would like to do that. You can no longer yell at us about that. But you cannot yell at us for not mentioning that the Zeta Project also spoke about Bizarro. There we go.
That's right. Perfect. And from there, Cal, we'll get into some of the fun extracurricular adventures of Bizarro in the DCAU. We'll get to his some merchandise and some toys and statues and things like that. But the first thing we'll mention is, of course, a couple of notable tie-in comic appearances that he had. Probably most memorably, it would be his appearance in Superman Adventures number 29, an issue which also features Lobo, and it features Bizarro looking for love. And while Lobo and Superman are fighting, he actually makes off with Lois Lane. And it's kind of a fake out moment at the end of that book, as you think he's sort of transformed her somehow with Lobo's help into this like freakish Bizarro version of herself. But it turns out actually it's another clone that this machine has created. And now, at least in the comic book version of the DCAU, Bizarro has an actual bride, a Bizarro Lois. So that's he gets a bit of a happy ending in that scene. That's like a kind of a fun little epilogue to his being alone on a planet with his weird lizard dog, and I guess maybe Pixie is still there too.
Yeah, I think this one would have been a fun one to see, I feel like, on screen, just because the interaction of, and we did see Mixie and Bizarro obviously get get a crossover episode there. But something between the main man and Bizarro appearing on screen at the same time and hearing Brad Garrett and Tim Daly doing Bizarro at the same time would have been fun to see on screen. But yeah, I do remember reading that issue a bunch when we were younger, and it's probably in that Superman Adventures compendium, as are a lot of these, if not coming out in volume two, due out later this year.
That's right. So good chance to recollect those as they're coming out in these modern printings. If you want to catch up on that, it's fun. Great cover for that, I believe, done by Rick Burchett, with Superman and Lobo kind of off in the background as Superman is holding this like rock rock like statue of Lois in his arms. It's as Bizarro is. It's great, very memorable cover on that one. And Bizarro did appear briefly in Superman Adventures number 31. They do a storyline where like an alternate universe evil version of Kryptonians come and invade Earth, and there's sort of a group of villains that set out to try to defend the Earth from or defend Metropolis from these evil Kryptonians, including Metallo, Parasite, and yes, Bizarro himself. Though they are ultimately unsuccessful in that endeavor. Fun to have Bizarro on the side of the good guys for a minute there. And then this actually will lead us into our question of the week, which of course is brought to you once again by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, where if you become a monthly supporter, as mentioned by Cal earlier, you can in fact get the right to ask us a question, which we will answer on the show. And our buddy Zach actually has a question related to Bizarro's final DCAU tie-in appearance, at least his final major one, which is in issue 13 of Justice League Adventures. We see the Justice League fighting just very briefly in like one panel. There is a Bizarro Justice League that the Justice League is tangling with, and that leads us into Zach's question.
It sure does, which reads as such. The tie-in comic Justice League Adventures issue number 6 briefly shows the team each fighting Bizarro versions of themselves. So my question is, how do you think they were created? I know in the 1960s comics, as well as an episode of the Super Friends, there was a special ray gun that created a Bizarro of anyone. I personally like to think that Luthor and Dr. Tang were involved in an updated and less corny way. What are your thoughts? Great question, Zach. I appreciate that. He also says, P.S. An episode of this would have been an absolute riot with this all 7 of the actors being the voices of the Bizarro versions of their characters. Wholeheartedly agree. Hearing Kevin Conroy and Michael Rosenbaum do Bizarro versions of their characters would have been very funny. I agree. So I'll jump in first, Liam. I will say that I would like to also believe that it would, if this indeed did happen, that it would have involved something a little bit more interesting than a ray gun that created Bizarro version.
The most Super Friends thing of all time. We just have a gun that can do that now.
We just have a gun that points and shoots and creates it. Sure. Great.
We just have this lying around. We found it behind a desk.
What's the technology behind that? We don't know and we don't care. Neither will the kids watching this. Just it's a gun that does it, okay? I think I do like the idea of Star Labs being involved. Obviously, we know that evil Professor Hamilton really turns his back on Superman, and we already know that his DNA was used to help create some of my Doomsday iterations always get confused. Do they confirm that Superman's DNA was used to create Doomsday in this? I can't remember.
Yes, I think I believe they do, and certainly Superman was certainly part of Doomsday's creation. And then, of course, we also know, as anyone would that watched Justice League knows, that of course Supergirl's DNA was taken to create Galatea as well. So we know they're mixing it up with a lot of Kryptonians. So I do like the angle that this is like an early Cadmus attempt at what they ended up perfecting, arguably, with Galatea and the Ultimen later on.
Yeah, I think that's makes the most sense. If you're gonna go kind of out there, maybe in order for Bizarro to get off of his planet, Mixie decides to make a deal with him that he's going to create a whole bunch of friends for him,
Hey.
super friends, if you will. And
Hmm.
he creates a, Bizarro Justice League to help Bizarro in order to get him off of his back, and then that causes Bizarro to release Mixie from his responsibilities on Bizarro World, and then Bizarro and his Bizarro Leaguers come to Earth in that way. So maybe that would be a fun little nod to a Super Friends type storyline without just using a ray gun.
Yeah, or my alternate was just going to be, well, we just talked about that he had some sort of cloning technology in Superman Adventures number 29, so maybe he just like gets the drop on a bunch of the Justice Leaguers and throws them into the machines to make clones of them as well.
There you go.
Maybe maybe even with Lobo along to help him out once again. But yeah, I like the idea of something. We've talked about it recently a lot. I love an extra bit of fan servicey stuff. So yeah, connecting it to Cadmus or to back to Lex and Dr. Tang, as Zach said, love all of that. Any version of that where we connect it back is always fun. So I love that, and I love that. This is one of the fun parts of interacting with folks like Zach on our socials and through buymeacoffee.com, which is just, one little panel in this one tie-in comic. I probably would not have even included this because I would have forgotten that it existed. But thanks to Zach, I knew to go collect that. That you can find that in Justice League Adventures number 13, is where that panel takes place. It's a fun issue. So that about does it for Bizarro's DCAU tie-in comics. But thankfully, Cal, we have quite a few, or at least a few other collectibles to talk about, including, of course, action figures.
That's right, Liam. We have not a ton here, actually, when it comes to it. I was kind of expecting a little bit more when it came to collectibles for Bizarro, based on how, like we already said, recognizable the character is. But I think we've touched on this before when we've done some Superman the Animated Series themed spotlight episodes, and that is that show was a grossly underserved line of toys. A lot of
Mhm.
Supermans came out in that toy line. Not a lot of other characters came out in that line, but they did manage to release a Bizarro, which growing up we eventually obtained a Bizarro, but it was not the original release of the Bizarro. He comes with a little tire and a like little gear from a machine, and he has a little wheel on his back, and you spin the wheel up and down, and his arms spin like he's spinning his arms around real fast. He can swing the tire or swing the gear or both at the same time. So he got a single release with that, and the way that we came into possession of that figure was there was a 4-pack released later on where he was a part of that 4-pack. So two options to get Bizarro here. It's a great looking figure. It looks on model way more, I feel like, than a lot of the toys from that than that set did. He does look a little bit more like the character. I think the only thing that they didn't do was they didn't give him pupils. So he's got like these
Yeah.
almost like zombie Frankenstein's monster style looking eyes. But everything else on the figure, he's got the little hunch. He's kind of got the exaggerated looking, goofy looking feet. His cape is a little wonky. His hair looks, disheveled. He looks pretty on model for what the show was in 3D form. So great job by the folks at Kenner Hasbro at that time and creating one of the few characters in that set that actually looked like what they looked like on television. So, great job, great looking figure. If you want to pick that one up. Then we did get a Justice League Unlimited version of this character as well. We actually got two of them. You have the standard one, the red and blue Superman, and then in one of the 6-packs later on, they would release one that was like, for some reason, he was purple. Like it wasn't quite the discolored Superman suit, but he was like purple shaded with like a blue suit with almost like a pale. I don't know what color that is. And it's like an Easter purple color almost for his suit. So this one, we've talked about the Justice League Unlimited Mattel line. You can, if you want to hear some of our thoughts on that, you can check out our latest Black Friday episode in the archives. But that's a fun line, obviously, because they did so many different characters. This character has a unique set of arms that are super lanky and given that kind of goofy look. He has the Superman legs though, so he doesn't quite match up with what you see on screen with that real unique looking bow-legged stance that he had. But all things considered, it's a decent looking figure if you want to pick it up. There's plenty of them out there because he had multiple releases, so it's a good one to pick up if you want to complete that part of your secret society or Injustice gang or whichever version of Grodd's gang you want to create. He's there to help you out. So good looking figure. And then the only other item, like physical item collectible in this realm, like a three-dimensional version of this, was a early late 90s, early stages DC Direct Superman the Animated Series maquette of this character, which those maquettes are really cool looking. You and I have famously gone on record saying we're, quote, not statue guys, which is good for our wallets because they tend to be very expensive and especially some of those older ones are a little bit hard to find. But those 3D Bruce Timm, Glenn Wong, whoever, Glenn Murakami, whoever was doing the designs for those shows are very difficult for me to avoid because they just look beautiful, and this Bizarro maquette is no different. So again, it faithfully adapts the look from the show, probably the best out of all of the three-dimensional incarnations that I've mentioned. It looks just really neat. He's got the bow-legged stance. He's got the right coloration. He's got the pupils in his eyes. He's got the look on his face. He's got the wobbly arms or warbly arms. It's a great little statue there. And if you have the rest of the set, which includes like Green Lantern and a couple of the other, I think there's a couple other villains in that set too. But it would look good on a shelf for sure. Even if it's just by itself, it's a good conversation piece. Everybody loves Bizarro, as we already said. He's in the forefront of the minds of the general public in knowing who the character is. So, and honestly, with the James Gunn universe, I would not be surprised to see him make an on-screen appearance, an official on-screen appearance at some point in the not too distant future, if the James Gunn universe continues here. So that wraps it up for our collectibles there. Hard to just go out of three, like what's your favorite, but I think I'd probably have to go with the Hasbro, just because it is the most playable and fun one to have, and honestly, like I said, is the most faithful to his appearance on the show. You got a favorite out of those three there, Liam? We're probably gonna rule out the statue since we're not statue guys.
Yeah, I think that original Kenner release, just because that's the one I hold most fondly. It's such a great look. I remember us getting that. I believe we got it in the 4-pack. So, but just remember playing endlessly, especially because he had the wheel on his back that spun his arms, and just playing with that, using that as like a fidget toy quite a bit. So yeah, I think the Kenner release is yeah, he does have like the better like hunch in his back, and they did, as you mentioned, while not usually being great at the nailing the designs of the characters, they pretty much nailed it on that Bizarro, other than maybe the eyes and the jagged teeth and all of that, and the way the hair is sculpted on his head. So yeah, that original Kenner figure certainly has a special place in my heart. What about you?
Yeah, yeah, I'd go with that figure as well. Hard to argue with that one, I'd say. And then Liam, wrapping things up, since we didn't have a ton of collectibles to go through here, I did find a couple things we don't usually touch on, but I think these are so fantastic they're worth discussing, and they're collectible adjacent. So while there's been no Mondo Bizarro figure released yet. Nothing I can bully you into buying as far as Bizarro merch is that way. The good folks at Phantom City Creative, who are probably more known for their Batman the Animated Series line of posters that they did an incredible series of silkscreen posters that they eventually published in a book. Pretty much anytime somebody wants to post a Instagram post about a particular episode of Batman the Animated Series, they're probably posting one of those posters. But they have done actually a couple of Superman the Animated Series posters as well, including they did this really interesting Superman kind of looking out over Metropolis poster, and it's instead of the traditional like 18 by 24 looking poster, this one is a little bit longer. So I think this one is probably 24 by 48 or something like that. So it's a little bit longer, it's more rectangular. So they did a Superman version, and then they did a variant that ended up being the Bizarro variant, which has him overlooking Bizarro's world, which we see obviously at the end of Bizarro's world and in Little Big Head Man. So if you were interested in getting this piece by Phantom City Creative, it was a great companion piece to the Superman that they put out at around the same time. Or if you're just a big Bizarro fan, you could just grab this one in and of itself. But that one's a really fun piece, a really great screen print. As I said, Phantom City does an incredible job at doing the artwork for the all of those Batman animated series posters. They continue to be responsible for the artwork on the DCAU box art for the 1/6 collection that Mondo does. So that's a nice little piece there. And then last but not least, as we talked about before, the Bizarro theme song actually it made such an impression and is actually so pivotal and so interesting. I feel like that Mondo decided that they would release it on its own die cut vinyl. So they did a vinyl that was die cut in the shape of Bizarro's logo. And they released it with Phantom City creative artwork on the cover and on the inside of the vinyl pressing. So if you wanted to get this at the time, I'm sure it's not for sale on their site anymore, so you'd have to get it. It was $25, and you got this really neat collectible honoring this piece by like we said, is attributed to Shirley Walker. It's got a really unique piece of art on the front with Bizarro flying towards the person holding the. If you were holding the record in your hand, he would be flying towards you. Just a really striking image on the front that looks really great. And then on the inside, it has the same artwork from that poster that I mentioned. It also as a part of this vinyl casing. So all of that printed on a Superman Man of Steel shaped S looking vinyl, and it plays Bizarro's theme on it. So how about that? So if you're a vinyl collector and a DCAU fan, that's a unique piece for you to own. Go out there and see if you can find it. But I just like the fact that he didn't have as many toys or collectibles as we normally would look for, but there's still plenty of Bizarro love that's happening out there. And who knows, Mondo's done a couple of Bizarro themed things already. We see them releasing their Superman the Animated Series in their line. So who's to say there won't soon be another Bizarro collectible in the future? Perhaps maybe the best Bizarro figure ever made.
Yeah, that would be tempting. I mean, immediately, my thought was you just go to the accessories as we often do. Maybe we'll do another volume of that Mondo wish list characters someday. But yeah, the alternate heads, the crypto accessory. There's so many fun things you could put with the Bizarro. The rock version of Lois from the world. I think you could definitely do a quite iconic Bizarro from that Mondo set, if that's the direction they go. Hopefully we have more Superman characters to come in that line. It appears that maybe we do. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But yeah, suffice to say, I think as to sort of sum things up as we get towards the end here, Cal, Bizarro not the most impactful DCAU character, despite being a very impactful character in kind of every other medium. Like
Yeah.
he's always got to show up in a Superman show or movie. He's in Superman and Lois. There's sort of versions of like the evil twin. It is sort of the classic evil twin trope, just made through the superhero lens, right? Like he's an iconic character for a reason, even if his DCAU version is played a bit more for comic relief.
Yeah, it's always a fun thing to go to. I feel like I think this one kind of gets away with it because he's been around for so long. I don't know if a modern evil twin trope would work in comics in the way that this one does. But I think because he's been around for so long, and I think as we discussed, I think the fact that they didn't take this one super seriously in a way that uh made it difficult to accept. Like they kind of do poke fun at it a little bit, or they do take it in a lighthearted way and try not to make it super serious when it gets once he's gone into the full transformation and we're into the second and third episode, it's almost strictly played more on the goofy side of things. So, and that's okay. Like it's okay for that to be the case. Would it have served the character better to be a little bit more serious or to be more evil? I think the argument could be made, yes, but that's rewriting history. So I think what we end up getting here is a memorable trilogy of episodes in Superman the Animated Series, a smattering of appearances in Justice League Unlimited, but again, a character who I think if you watched the entire run of Superman the Animated Series, those three episodes are going to stand out because of who the character is and how memorable he is. He's the evil version of Superman. Like he's the anti-Superman, even if he's not straight up evil in some of the episodes here. So yeah, I think all things considered, he's certainly one of the most memorable characters. He plays probably a bigger role than you would remember in just kind of if you haven't watched the show in a long time. But yeah, not so much so that it detracts from the other kind of big bads. He's certainly not in the I feel like in the same atmosphere or in the same well, he's not on the same level as Lex or Darkseid, I would say. I think he's probably in that parasite probably below Metallo also. Like he's kind of like in that sea level villain despite having multiple episodes.
Yep, totally agree there. He's a fun character to talk about, but certainly, yeah, did not rise to the upper echelon of Superman villains, at least in the DCAU. With all of that, we want to thank everybody for listening today, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those other podcasting apps, or of course, if you're listening on our YouTube channel. Great free way to support us is to just make sure you're subscribed on wherever you listen to us. Give us 5 stars. If it lets you leave a review like it does on Apple Podcasts, leave a review for us, and if we see it and give us 5 stars on that review, we'll even read it out on the show and offer to send you a little gift as a thank you for that. That always gets us bumped up in the all important, ever changing search algorithms. And of course, we also have our socials. You can follow us at DCAU Review on pretty much all of the big socials and the small ones too. We're certainly more active on Instagram and on Twitter X. Those are the best ways to get in contact with us, see what we'll be reviewing on upcoming episodes, as well as just some general discussion. We had a lot of fun with interacting with folks on there. And then, as we've already talked about, there are some financial ways to support us. If you like our show enough and you have a little change to spare, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. That's the best, most direct way to support us. And like Cal said, you can become a monthly subscriber there. You can also, of course, head to our store. There's a link in the show notes for that, where you can find our store page, which has shirts and hats and mugs and all kinds of little fun things from phrases and logos that Cal's designed, inspired by the DCAU, that you can pick up something for yourself, and that helps us out as well. However you choose to listen and support, we hope you'll continue doing so next week when we have one more Superman episode to talk about. Although this time it's not going to be a DCAU Superman, as we are taking a trip around the multiverse, Cal.
That's right, Liam. We will continue with our Superman themed month, but as you mentioned, we're taking a trip around the multiverse. The 2006 animated series Legion of Superheroes, featuring the Man of Tomorrow himself, Superman. We're going to be reviewing the episode Legacy, but not that episode Legacy, obviously. This is a different episode of Legacy that is featured on this series, Legion of Superheroes, not the one where Superman is Darkseid's pawn. Or who knows? I've never seen it. So maybe this episode is also a feature. I'm going to guess it doesn't feature him as Darkseid's pawn. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, do not look for that next week's Elseworlds episode. It's not false advertising. I didn't say it. You can't yell at me on the internet about it. We're going to be back next week, though, with the Legion of Superheroes episode, Legacy. Looking forward to reviewing that episode with you, Liam.
Absolutely, Cal. Can't wait. Yes, not a show that gets talked about very much when you think about the different animated versions of Superman. So excited to revisit it for the first time in quite a long time, both for our show and for this episode. I'm not even sure if I've ever seen it or if I have more than once. So excited to review another episode of the Legion of Superheroes animated series next week. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU.
Arrivederci.